go on with the talk. Right, today is the Agganna Sutta, part 2 of 2. That is on, according to my notes here, page 100 something. Yeah? Page 173. Okay? So let us recap a bit. Okay, so this Agganna Sutta is a metaphor. Remember, I used the word metaphor last time. So it's a kind of story of great humor, very subtle humor. It's meant to make us happy, meant to make us smile, even laugh. In a sense, the Buddha is making fun of the monks, especially those monks who break the Vinaya rules. So if you look at some of those things mentioned, like these devas using their hand to scoop up the food and eating it. The monks are not supposed to do that. So this story is reminding the monks, don't do that, things like that. So we must always have this kind of open mind when we read the suttas, especially when stories other than Dhamma language. In other words, they're using worldly language. So these are stories. You must not take them historically, in other words. This is not about the evolution of the universe, although it is based on such idea. In fact, it's amazing how the Buddha could talk about the evolution of the universe or re-evolution of the universe in a humorous way, and yet a scientist listening to this will say, how did he know all these things? So he uses meditation, he saw all these things. It's just that the vocabulary of the people at that time would not be able to understand, even if the Buddha explained it, So we're talking about the vocabulary we have right now in our time. We have the vocabulary to talk about black holes, about quarks, and so many things. And in the next generation, they will tell you, oh, you're all wrong, and there's something else, So now they say even the steady-state universe, they have different ideas, things like that. So here the Buddha is using a story, telling it's not about the universe, it's about our behavior, it's about our conduct. It's about these two young Brahmins, Vāseṭṭha and Bhāra. They are probationary monks, young Brahmins, very intelligent, and their colleagues are very unhappy with them, really riling them, scolding them, reviling them roundly. So they told the Buddha about it, and the Buddha said, well, these Brahmins forgotten their past, they talk about being high class, white skin, they're looking down on others, but they're just like anyone else. So if they do something wrong, the karma also act on them in the same way as anyone else who does something wrong. Then the Buddha goes on to talk about that there is this universal moral conduct, some kind of universal value called Dhamma. Okay, so Dhamma here is a broad term, something which is very human. Wherever we go, there is a sense of decency, respect, friendliness, politeness, something like that. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to be human. There will be no civilization. There is this Dhamma. You can translate as it's more than culture. It's humanity, if you like. Sometimes culture can narrow us down. Culture can actually limit our growth. Culture can actually make us superstitious. So this is more than culture. Right? Maybe humanity might be a close term, and social kind of connection with others, loving kindness comes to mind. Right? So that's Dhamma. So you can see this word Dhamma has got such a broad meaning. It's got the broadest meaning of all the Buddhist terms. Then the Buddha goes on to say that all renunciants who truly practice, they are sons of the Sakya. The Sakya, of course, is the Buddha. So even if you practice, you're a layman, you keep the precepts. When you're keeping the precepts, you really try to keep the precepts, 5 precepts, 8 precepts. You are son of the Sakya. Then the Buddha goes on with the story of the universe. This is how the universe re-evolved, and the devas came down from Abhasara, and then they saw this sweet earth, and they started tasting it, and then the more when they taste this, they start losing their brightness a little bit at first, and then the earth, the universe is evolving, so this sweet earth, I don't know, you can call it something like protein particles floating on the water. It became earth fat, so it became something more solid, and then creepers, and then wild rice. So you see a kind of vegetative evolution, and all this can be eaten just like that. So this is kind of, if you're in the jungle, you find lots of fruits and even leaves that you can eat. So the devas were doing just this, they were eating all these things, and because these are not their normal food. They're taking all this physical food, and it make them more physical. So they began to lose their ethereal form, their deva form, their radiance slowly going away, and they're becoming more and more solid. So this, you can make a very nice movie on this. And then you see many of them, doing this, and thousands, even millions of them. And then slowly they began to gather together. So you see this rise of civilization. People begin to get together, do things together. There is economy, and they start seeing each other, looking some more beautiful, some ugly, and then they begin to have a relationship with each other, and they start building houses. So you can see kind of how civilization actually happens, a crash course in civilization by the Buddha. And then once you start gathering the food, things begin to change at the same time. From the way we read, we listen to the sutta, it's as if it is said that they behave badly and then things change. They started plucking, harvesting this, say the wild rice, and then the wild rice stopped growing, and then sun and moon appeared, and so on. Now we should not see this as cause and effect. It's not. I mean, of course, there may be some connection, like human insensibility causes environmental problems. That, of course, can happen. But we can also say another way of looking at it is by way of correlation. They happen at the same time in the case of the evolution of the universe. Okay, so they started building the houses, and they have agriculture because the plants don't grow naturally anymore. They are not edible like that anymore because they started storing all this food. Then they started growing them themselves. They start harvesting them. And then once you start storing things, and people who are lazy will steal from you. And people who steal, when they're caught, they will lie. So you begin to have crimes. When things are externalized, when you live on things, these things can be lost. Okay, so you have this, there is a deeper sense here, in other words. Then the people started dividing the land up. Say, okay, this is mine, that's yours. Okay, so you have the idea of property came up. This is a very interesting idea about economics, right? Then the Buddha is saying, okay, this is what happened with these people, but the next step is very important. You have people doing work. Right, this is in section 20 to 29, where the Buddha said, okay, you have this group of people called the Kashatriyas, or rather you can say people who work on the land, keta. Okay? From keta you get katiya. Okay? They work on the land, they grow things, so they became katiyas, they became the nobles, later on they became warriors. Okay? So that's one class, they work the land. Okay? Then you have those who are religious, who meditate, who study. So they are the Brahmins, okay? The religious, the educators, and so on. Then you have those who do business, who in a sense, here again the Buddha is very humorous. He says these businessmen enjoy life. All right, so this is the third group, the business group, the Vaishyas, okay? And then the last group are the workers. They have to do all the hard work. And these are the Shudras. So these are classes of people in terms of work, not by birth. So there is this mobility. And anyway, around in the same roughly the same section, the Buddha also talks about, okay, there's people having problems with other people stealing their property, so they decided to elect or appoint the best among them, kind of a leader, and this became Mahasamatha, the great elect. So he became the first king to maintain order in society. But to do that, he loses his chance to grow things and so on. So they compensate him by giving him rice and things like that. So you begin to have specialization of labor. And the first king arose, and not by birth but by election. It's very interesting here, right? So then the Buddha goes on to say, even at that time, people who do good deeds, who have good karma, they also benefit from the fruits of good karma. And those who karma are mixed, good and bad, then they also have the same kind of mixed results. So karma works on everyone alike. And now that's nearing the end of the sutta already. So let me continue, right, from where we left off. The part where you find these people, these beings, these newly evolved humans, they see each other as beautiful, ugly, and so on, right? So then they have lust for each other, then they have sexual contact with each other, and so on. Right? So now we come to section 17, all right? So let me read to you section 17 on page 173. Vāseṭṭha, what was considered improper or immoral then is nowadays considered proper, moral. Vāseṭṭha, in those days, those beings who indulge in sex were not allowed into the village or town for a month or two. Since those beings fell into excessive, uncontrollable intoxication with this impropriety, immorality, they resorted to building houses just to hide this immorality. This is quite a humorous statement, actually. Why houses were first built? They're going to hide this. Basically, this is a way of saying that it's how families start. Okay, the Buddha puts it in a really humorous way. So we see here there is this idea of restraint. Humans are very careful, even in the early, after they left the animal stage, if you like. They learn to respect each other, basically. So this precept against sexuality is just that. It is respecting the other person's body. And that also means respecting the other person's freedom, because freedom means your free movement of your body. You can go wherever you like, or you don't have to go, you don't have to do something. That's freedom. So the third precept is quite broad in that sense. So sex is not just pleasure, but here the idea is, of course, there's responsibility. You get children after that, and that is another area we have to consider in the morality of sex. But here the story goes on to show how human beings evolve and started procreating among themselves. So from devas they became humans, and then they have procreation, they have families, all right? So now we come to section 17.4. They started storing food. Then Vāseṭṭha, it occurred to a being lazy by nature, now why should I trouble myself gathering rice for my dinner in the evening and for my breakfast in the morning, right? So he decided to just store. See, why don't I gather enough for both, And then this starts snowballing. So why should I just collect for 2 days? Why don't I collect for 4 days? And so on. And in the end, they say, why don't I collect for 8 days? And they became lazy, and they got a lot of time. And then one day somebody said, why should I collect at all? My neighbor has got so much food, let me take it from him. And that's called stealing. That's how it all started. So this is, in philosophy, we call this etiology, how things started. Okay? So this stealing started because people kept things. So this caused problems. The rice was stored up and people stole it. So now the beings, these human beings, early human beings, they begin to notice all this, right? So they talk to each other, there is communication, they started discussing, they said, wow, look at us, we were devas, and then we evolved like this, all these vegetables started growing, and then we started collecting all these things, and then people steal it from us, and there's so much problems, right? So this is the next section, 18. You notice it says, then Vāseṭṭha, the beings assembled and lamented. Bad things have appeared amongst us beings. We were formerly mind-made, feeding on zest, self-luminous, moving about through the air, glorious, and so on, right? So, and now they are more human. They say, and then sun and moon appeared, stars, constellation appeared, night and day appeared, months and fortnights, years and seasons. So in other words, we have a very evolved society already by this time. And so these are all their reflection. So they're thinking how they got all this food. Now they have so much problems, right? And then they caught this thief. Okay, this section 19 onwards, I'm summarizing for you. So here, this person steals what is taught by someone else, and he's caught. So he's caught the first time, and then these people tell him, "You please don't do this again. Okay, this is wrong, right?" So this person say, "Okay, So I mean, he lied. This is so stealing, and that's lying. And he's caught the second time. Again, this thief was told, you don't do it again, please. And the thief said, okay, still again is lying. And the third time is caught. So this time, those early humans thought, wow, we can't go on like this. So you begin to notice this is not working. You just tell the person it's not working. That's when they decided they must do something serious, something that is permanent, so to speak. So this is where you come to section 20. Again, they are reflecting on all these bad things that have happened. So they say these thieves, they need to be denounced. They must be publicly say, okay, you cannot do this. They must be censured, and if necessary, these thieves must be banished. They have to go away because they are lazy and they're not contributing to society. So 21, this is where they decided to they elected this leader. Okay, section 21. This leader, he said to be, he is appointed, agreed to by the people, Mahajanena Sammatto Vāseṭṭha, therefore is called the great elect, Mahasammatta. Okay. So this is the first king. And then, of course, this first king is a Kashatri. So here the Buddha is showing that the classes arose because of the duty and the task that people did. 21.2, they are lords of the fields, Ketanang Pati. Therefore they are called Kshatriya or Khattiya. This is a play on the word Keta. Keta or Kshetra in Sanskrit, it means field. And then from there you get Khattiya. In Sanskrit, Kshatriya, those who have fields. This is the original meaning. In other words, they were involved in agriculture. So they were called Kshatriyas. So here the Buddha says this is a second name that arose, a name in terms of a class of people doing this kind of work. And then there's a very interesting idea of kingship. Okay, it's 21.3. He brings joy to others through the Dhamma, righteousness. Dhamma here means righteousness, justice. Therefore, Vāseṭṭha, he is called Raja, king, right? So here is the Buddhist concept of kingship. Raja. Raja comes from the Pali word ranjati, meaning to make happy. So a king is someone who makes others happy by maintaining law and order, by punishing criminals and so on. So this was the early idea of kingship, not those powerful people dictators and so on. So the Buddha says here, and thus Raja was the third name that arose. Raja and Kshatriya actually are very close as synonyms. So 21.4, thus Vāseṭṭha was the origin of the Kashatriya circle. Right? So this is called a circle, mandala. So this is a group of people who are called Kshatriyas. So they maintain law and order, they work the fields, and they became rulers, okay, who make sure that the people are happy. Then the Buddha go on to talk about the Brahmins. Okay, this is where, remember at the start, the Buddha says the Brahmin forgot the past. So this is the past that the Brahmins forget, according to the Buddha. So here, section 22. Then Vāseṭṭha, some of the beings thought bad things have appeared among us, and on that account stealing will appear, censure will appear, lying will appear, punishment will appear, banishment will appear. Let us keep away from bad and unwholesome things. So this group of people, they say, let's not do bad things. Let us try our best to be good. So this is the idea of religion. So they were called Brahmins because they keep away. 22.2. They keep away. And the Pali word is bāhinti. They keep out, keep away from bad and unwholesome things, Vāseṭṭha. Therefore, they are called Brahmins. Okay, Brahmana. So here is a very interesting etymology, right? So the Buddha said the original meaning of the Brahmins, or today we use the word priest. They're not really priests. They were those who make an effort not to commit crimes. Okay. So this is the first name that arose in terms of Brahmins. So what did they do next? The Buddha says 22.3, they built leaf huts in the forest abodes and meditated in them. With neither coal nor smoke from a cooking fire, with pestle and mortar set aside, they went into villages, towns, or capitals to look for food. Okay, by this time there are already towns and cities, right? In the evening for their evening meal, in the morning for their morning meal. When they have found their food, they returned to their leaf huts in the forest abodes and meditated. So there you are. Even in those early days, these Brahmins, these people who say, okay, we're not going to do any bad thing, we're going to live peacefully, we're not even going to cook. So they live like monks, if you like. So they go around, they collect food from others in the morning when they needed their morning meal, then in the evening one more time. Then after that they went back to their leaf hut in the forest to meditate. They live peacefully like that. 22.4. People saw this. So the people noticed this, everything was repeated what they did there. They live in the forest, in leaf huts, and they go into the town to collect food like monks, and they go back and meditate, and they do not commit any crime. They were good people. Now the Buddha gives an etymology explaining another wonderful quality of the early Brahmins. 22.5. They meditate, jayanti. Singular is jayati, okay? Vāseṭṭha. Therefore they are called meditators. Okay. Jayati, then you got jayaka, okay, a meditator. By the way, the noun is jhana. Okay, so one of the early meanings of jhana is simply meditation. Right? And so meditator was the second name that arose for them. Okay, so these were the early meditators. So the Brahmins have forgotten this. Right? Now you see again the Buddha going into humor mode one more time. Very subtle humor. 23. However, Vāseṭṭha, some of the beings unable to meditate in leaf huts settle around towns and villages and compile texts. They started writing books. If we speak in modern terms, they started writing books. But these are not books like what we have in our hands today. Texts. In other words, they recited all these sacred teachings. They have ideas about peace, happiness. So basically the Buddha is saying those who cannot meditate, they started discussing, thinking, philosophy and religion, those holy texts. People saw them and noticed it. They say, oh, these people, they are unable to meditate. And they settle nearer to the towns, not in the forest, because those meditators, they will live in a quiet, peaceful forest. 23.3. They do not meditate now. Na danime jayanti. Vāseṭṭha. Therefore, they are called reciters, non-meditators. Now, this one, the English translation is a bit problematic. You can't really fully translate. So I've used two translations here. The Pali word is ajjayaka. Now, if you just say ajjayaka in Pali or adhyayaka in Sanskrit, today it means reciter, those who recite those sacred texts and so on. But when you look carefully at this word, ajjayaka is actually a negative form of jayaka. And jayaka, as we know, means meditator. Right? So, adhyayaka, reciters, also mean non-meditators. So they became religious priests because they can't meditate. Right? So here you can see the subtle humor that the Buddha is already making. And then the Buddha says in 23.4, at that time, Vāseṭṭha, it was considered a lowly designation. Nowadays, it is considered to be the best. Okay, so those days, people didn't look up to those who recite prayers and talk about all this philosophical stuff, which are not very useful to them at that time. So, but nowadays, wow, we regard all these ideas as very profound and even pay for it. So you can see the humor here. Basically, the Buddha is saying this is what the Brahmins originally did. They were good people, right? They avoid doing all those crimes. They live in the forest to meditate. And the worst so-called thing they did was to recite sacred texts. This is what the Brahmins did. This is what they forgot. And now they are attacking others, saying that they are the purest. Then the Buddha goes on to talk about the merchants. How did the merchant class arise? 24. Then Vāseṭṭha, some of the beings indulging in sexual intercourse take up domestic occupations. So here the Buddha is talking about all these businessmen. They have a lot of money, a lot of time, so they like to have big families. So they, of course, procreate. So this Vāseṭṭha was the origin of the Vaisya circle. Vaisya is an Anglicization of Sanskrit. Vaisya. Pali is Vesa Mandala. So this is the business class. Okay, so these people who went into business, became rich and so on, they are called Vaisyas. So they have their own circle. And then the next class, again, the class number 4, this is the 4th class, section 25. Then Vāseṭṭha, the remaining beings led cruel, mean lives. So these people were kind of, we might say, uneducated, or kind of very rough kind of living. So they were quite, but they're hardworking. 25.2, they lead cruel, mean lives. Therefore, Vāseṭṭha, they are called Shudra. And this is the name that arose. So this is the class that do all the hard work. They were the hunters and they kill animals for food, things like that. So they provided all these services. So this is the 4th group of people doing this kind of work. Menial workers, if you like. So they were not born into it. They were kind of like, it's the job they did. See? And then the Buddha mentioned one more interesting class, which is not part of the traditional class system of the Brahmins. That is the recluse class. 26. There came a time, Vāseṭṭha. So it did not happen at once. So it kind of slowly evolved. First you got the 4 classes, the Kashatriyas, the Brahmins, the Vaisyas, and then the Shudras. Then 26, there came a time, Vāseṭṭha, when the Kshatriya disapproved of his own way of life. Notice here the word Dhamma means way of life, another different sense. And left the household for homelessness, thinking, I will become a recluse. This is very interesting. So the Buddha says there comes a time when these people who are agriculturalists, they have land, they were growing things, they decided, oh, I don't want this kind of life. So they gave it up. Then they went on their own. They just want to be happy, at peace with themselves, like the monks. So they are samana, recluse. In fact, the word samana also is used for monks. Then the Brahmin too disapproved of his own way of life and left the household for homelessness, thinking, I'll become a recluse. So it says the Brahmin also taught in the same way. And then 26.3, the Vaisya, the merchant also, decided that they do not want to make money anymore. They want to be happy, living peacefully by themselves. So they say, I want to be a recluse. I want to renounce. And the Shudra also taught the same way. They do not want to be violent or doing all these lowly jobs. They want to be a recluse. So here you see again all these 4 different classes merging back into another class, a 5th class, recluses, the holy men, if you like, the samanas. So anyone can leave any of these 4 classes and then become this recluse. All right? So in the next section, 27, the Buddha goes back to talk about karma, okay? About right conduct, wrong conduct. 27. Indeed, Vāseṭṭha, a Kshatriya who, having done bad deeds through the body, through speech, through the mind, hold wrong views, because of doing deeds rooted in wrong views, with his body's breaking up after death, reappears in the plane of misery. And so whoever creates bad karma, whether it's a Kshatriya, Brahmin, Vaishya, Shudra, or even recluse, if they have wrong views, they will face the same karma. So here again you see the Buddha saying this commonality of how karma works. Karma is the universal condition, if you like. Okay? Okay, we have a bit more to go. I'm going to stop here first, just for a short while. Okay, so let's continue now. Section 28, right? So here is where the Buddha talks about good karma. Good karmic fruits are universal. So all these Kshatriyas, whether they are Kshatriyas or they are Brahmins or they are Vaisyas or Shudras or recluses, whether they belong to the 4 social classes or they are holy men, if they do good deeds, then of course they enjoy all this good karma. This is a universal law. Then there are those whose karma are mixed, good and bad. Then the fruits, the result of their karma also are mixed. And this is also universal. There's no favoritism. Karma does not forgive. Karma does not take sides, in other words. And this teaching is given a special consideration in another sutta called Vāseṭṭha Sutta, where the Buddha says that karma is karmic virtue or karmic vice decides whether you're good or bad. Now, in section 30, the Buddha says, a Kshatriya Vāseṭṭha, who is restrained in body, speech and mind, by means of cultivating the 7 limbs of awakening, attains nirvana in this life. Okay, so now the Buddha is talking about his teaching. Is anyone, in fact, can be a Kshatriya, someone who works on the land, or can be a Brahmin who is a religious person, or a Vaishya who is a businessman, or a Shudra, and of course a recluse. If they practice the 7 limbs of awakening. Okay, so these are the special teachings dealing with meditation, starting with mindfulness. Okay, that is the first limb of awakening. And then investigating mental states, number 2. Then number 3 is effort. Number 4 is zest. Zest is kind of meditative joy, tranquility, inner peace. concentration or samadhi, and then equanimity, the peacefulness of the mind. Basically what the Buddha is saying here is anyone from any class, or even outside the classes, if they follow the principles of meditation, they do it properly, they will be able to awaken, attain nirvana, be free from suffering. So here again the Buddha is declaring that Buddhism does not subscribe to any class system. Right? Now then the Buddha quotes a Brahma. This is of course a belief of the Brahmins, a high Brahma, a very well-known, beloved Brahma called Sanang Kumara, who is famous for his celibacy. So this Brahma says, the Kashatri is the best in this generation for those who look up to clan. The one endowed with knowledge and conduct is the best. He is the best amongst gods and humans. So here the Buddha is making a very interesting statement. He's saying, of all these classes, the most important are the Kshatriyas, because they work the land. They provide food for the people. So it's not the Brahmins, it's the Kshatriyas. And of course those who have knowledge and conduct, they are the best of even gods and humans. All right? Now, this is quite a tricky verse here. My understanding is that what the Buddha is saying is, if you want to be truly a productive human, then you got to contribute to society. So what better way than to produce food and to provide security for society? On the other hand, if you want to go higher, then you work on knowledge and spiritual knowledge and moral conduct. So if you do that, then you are the best, both on earth and in heaven, both among the gods and humans, in other words. So this idea of being awakened, being free from suffering, is just the highest ideal. So with that, the Buddha closes his teaching. So you can see here this, after telling an amazing story about the universe, the Buddha closes by saying that all men are equal. It's your conduct that makes you good or bad. And if you really direct your mind properly, you can become awakened. Doesn't matter what class or no class that you belong to or don't belong to. All right? So remember, sutta like the Agganna Sutta, it comes from the Digha Nikaya, the long teachings, the long texts. Okay? Now the long texts, they are full of stories, sometimes very amazing stories, and some really complex teaching, a long list of teachings. The suttas of the Digha Nikaya are long, and the idea is not so much to teach Dhamma like the Majjhima and the Samyutta, but rather to attract outsiders, to impress outsiders on what Buddhism has to offer. Right? So the Agganna Sutta is that kind of sutta. So you find there's not much teaching on meditation, in fact, just mention of meditators. So the Agganna Sutta is about saying, okay, this is how Buddhism views society. This is how we view humanity. This is how we talk about equality. Right? So you got to see the broad idea of the Agganna Sutta in that sense, and also of course humor. Okay. All right. So with that, I will end this talk, and you can ask questions, and then I can also ask questions about meditation, by the way. So we keep it open. All right.